Hi, it's old Joe, and I approve this message.
Bing, bing, bong, bong. Bing, 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 bong, bong. Bing, 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 bang, bang.
And now from Times Square, it's That Kevin Show.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be That Donald Show. We don't have that, so we have That Kevin Show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Straight ahead. Where will energy be headed with Trump? Gabriella Hoffman from the Independent Women's Forum. Ending slavery in our time, Todd Chatman. Sketch comedy from the Holderness Family and not a parody. What happens next? Pastor and author Max Lucado weighs in, and we salute our veterans with Ed Hall. And Drew Jacobs, Lee Greenwood, and Coffee Anderson in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, a man who got his prognostication game on this week and who's been seen wandering around Times Square yelling, "Recount Virginia, here."
So you saw that, did you?
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna chew you out and say, you shouldn't be spreading lies.
Of course you would.
I did. I went around Times Square and I was like, recount Virginia.
I know.
Because, baby, Votestradamus was back this week with a vengeance. I got one state wrong on the entire map. And it was because I had said that the Virginia race was going to be very, very close. And I tipped it, but I tipped it in Trump's favor. And it was a tip into Harris's favor. And that was the only thing I got wrong on the entire map. Take that, baby. And by the way, there's a lot of people asking questions like, how did we have like the most incredible turnout? You had long lines around the streets, like our polling place. I've never waited 15 minutes to vote before. In our little sleepy polling place, I waited an hour and 25 minutes to vote. My wife went later in the day, hour 45 minutes. We had lines out the door all day long. Every poll worker I called, every Secretary of State's office that was in contact with me, every party official that I spoke to said record turnout, long lines everywhere, lines out the door, record early vote. So many votes sent in early because the Republicans did it on par with the Democrats this time. They kind of matched each other. Record early vote, record lines, record. And then, lo and behold, check this out. We were 16 million short of the record. How did? Wait, hold on a second. How'd that work? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, record everything. The other word that they're using on all the TV shows is that the Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign. They're saying it with bated breath, like it's some sort of like mystery. Oh, she somehow lost, even though she ran a flawless campaign. And it's almost like a talking point. Like if you look at all the networks, like everybody got on the same page really quick. Like they knew that this was the word they were now supposed to be using to describe the flawless campaign. Take a look.
Harris ran basically a flawless campaign, but just on the most elemental level, being a mixed race woman from California maybe doomed her candidacy from the start.
Vice President Harris ran an incredible campaign. And I think because she ran an incredible campaign, it's been very telling about who we are, because her campaign did focus on the threat to democracy.
I think that she ran a flawless campaign, and I maintain that. I think now it's the time for us to work.
I thought she did a phenomenal job.
Yep.
She went all out. She did what she could.
You cannot use her failed run in 2019 and hold her against her after watching this incredible campaign she's run now.
I think Kamala Harris
hit her marks. I think most everybody that saw her campaign thought that she far exceeded expectations, and that the loss was less about the campaign she ran and more about where Americans were.
And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone.
And here's the real thing. How could it be flawless if he expanded the outreach to African American and Latinos for Republicans? Like, how could it be flawless on her part if he actually grew his coalition that gave him those majorities? He grew the coalition of women. I know that Mika Brzezinski doesn't want to hear this, but Trump got more women to vote for him than they've ever voted for before. So all of the hysterical bitter criers that are all over Instagram screaming, the screaming yup into their pillow while they tape themselves, which I've never understood. Why is that an attractive thing to put on social media? Who knows? But they do it. The wild screaming and gnashing of teeth and tearing of the clothes. He got more women. You can't blame this on just white dudes, because there were a lot of black dudes and brown dudes that voted for him. This was a thrashing across all demographics. He won the popular vote, people. He won 300 electoral votes. He expanded the Senate. He narrowly expanded the House. He swept the swing states, mostly because they had to play by actual rules this time. But that's a different discussion altogether. But again, how was her campaign flawless if he did all of this? And now, friends, he is coming after the deep state. His statement on social media on Thursday night, laying out the 9 areas that he's going to go clean house. People are shredding documents faster than they've ever shredded in their entire life. They're making it look like the Blitz at Nuremberg or something. Like, seriously, they are trying to cover up and get out. And there's going to be so many departments that they're going to clean house with, and it's going to be a great thing. We're going to fire a whole bunch of people that hate this country, that have been working in offices that could actually undermine the welfare of the people for years. And we have a president who's going to do that now. And he's going to do it quickly. He's also already solving world problems. Have you noticed this? Gaza, the Hamas is already begging for a peace deal in Gaza. You've got Russia. Putin's already begging for a meeting to discuss how he can equitably extricate himself out of Ukraine. You've got the Qataris kicking the Palestinians out of Qatar. Like, the new sheriff's back, baby. He's back, and it's going to be a lot of winning. It's just going to win all over the place. So congratulations, America. You got an actual president back. Someone who the whole world right now fears and is in trembling respect of, which is exactly where America needs to be. When the world is playing kissy face with us, they don't respect us. They don't hold us in esteem. But when they respect us, they immediately say, "Oh, I better watch my behavior. I better be on my best behavior." And you know who wins from that? Not just America, the entire world wins from that. Dennis Prager says it all the time. When America is feared, the world is safer. When America is liked, the world is dangerous. You can still like us and fear us at the same time. You can have respect for us, but and I don't mean fear like, oh, we're going to abuse them. Like, just a healthy respect. And that's what we got, friends. All right. Speaking of what I want you to get, sugarfinaholiday.com. Have you registered for the winning of the Advent calendar? Sugarfinaholiday.com. We're going to announce the winner on the final day of November. Sugarfinaholiday.com. Go and register. You could win the Hello Kitty Advent calendar. You could win the traditional Advent calendar that they have. Sugarfinaholiday.com. Sugarfinaholiday.com. And tonight, we have a matching challenge for those that would like to free a slave. Bringherhome.org. 34 slaves to go. 34 to go before we're done. Bringherhome.org. Let's get it done. and go to sugarfinaholiday.com to win an Advent calendar for this Advent season filled with candies and goodness. I'm Kevin McCullough. Huge show tonight. We're going to celebrate veterans. Max Lucado is here. Gabriella Hoffman's here. Hilarious new comedy from the Holderness Family. You don't want to miss a single moment. And the number one song, Glenn Campbell and Drew Jacobs, in the entire world, tonight on That Kevin Show.
Back to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show from Times Square. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. I wasn't surprised at the exit polling. I wasn't surprised at all that Trump expanded his base with women by 2 percentage points nationwide, and in some places even more than that. I know that one of the reasons why that happened is because every week we were talking to women that did not fit the Kamala Harris, everything's got to be about abortion mold. And I am so thankful for the Independent Women's Forum and for the tremendous contributors that we've had on this show over the last 4 years, talking about these issues every single day. And so this is my first chance since the election to thank them publicly. And today I get to thank the director of the Center for Energy and Conservation. She's just one of the department heads at IWF, but Gabriella Hoffman is back with us. Gabby, it's good to see you. Were you surprised that Trump did better with women than what people thought he was going to do?
I'm actually not surprised because every issue is a woman's issue. And I think the media, perhaps Vice President Harris, underestimated that women were not particularly sold on, let's say, abortion. They were very concerned about pocketbook issues, and that's what the exit polling and returns are indicative of. And energy is especially one of them. It wasn't a top issue, but women were voting with energy prices in mind. They were very terrified of high fuel prices, high gas prices, utility bills through the roof, and even kind of subsidiary energy costs like fuel and transport and food. Food is more expensive because transportation is more expensive, because it goes back to energy being more expensive. So everything derives from energy, even indirectly. And I think that was back of mind, top of mind for women too. So not surprised to see that. And I think there's a reckoning that's going to be happening. And the energy conversation going forward is going to be really interesting. I think people are looking past the climate alarmism and are looking for serious policy, which still protects the environment, but is not so gung-ho about
I don't
achieving stuff.
I don't doubt that at all. In fact, a lot of the news channels were using the word realignment. I think that we are seeing a fundamental restructuring of what government is going to be expected to accomplish and understand about the people that sent them there. I don't think anybody saw 300 electoral votes, popular vote win, expansions in the Senate, expansions in the House, and sweeping all of the swing states. I just don't think that anybody, if you'd drawn that up ahead of time, I don't think anybody would have said that that was what they thought was going to happen. I did kind of predict it with my map, but I got Virginia wrong. I thought he would tip the scale there. Let's stay on the energy issue for a second, because that's your real strength. The Harris campaign never addressed it. They never were asked to address it. They didn't have to. But the president would oftentimes only say, drill, baby, drill, and didn't at times get a lot more granular than that. I would like to see out of the energy department of the new cabinet, I would like to see a lot more meat on the bones when it comes to domestic drilling in particular. What do you think it looks like? Expanded leases? Is the Keystone Pipeline back on the menu? What are we talking about here from kind of day one?
Concretely, what we're going to see is probably a reversion back to the Trump years. I'm not sure if the Keystone Pipeline is still in consideration because I think the permit was terminated unless it gets renewed somehow. But because there's going to be a climate that is perhaps more friendly to infrastructure projects like that, we perhaps could see it renewed if it hasn't been wholly canceled. And that leads me to kind of 3 points or 3 takeaways that your listeners and viewers should be cognizant of or what to watch out for. Okay. We're going to see a permitting reform now that there's a Republican trifecta. If they're going to be serious about really unleashing energy, you have to get permitting reform under control and out there. It's long overdue to do it. More heavily skewed towards reliable energy, such as coal, oil, and natural gas, and also nuclear. Nuclear is going to be a big part of the equation. President-elect Trump has slightly touched on nuclear. He's gone into nuclear technology a little bit, straying away from the energy, but he has said that he would like to see more nuclear. Nuclear is pretty bipartisan now, especially Republicans are warming up to it, and I think the country will respond as well. Second, there has to be deregulation. But deregulation doesn't mean that there's going to be decimation of environmental quality. We saw during the Trump years that even though they got rid of 8 regulations, for every new regulation created, we saw cleaner air, cleaner water conditions, we saw emissions go down, and we didn't have to really ascribe ourselves to this wokeism that has largely dominated the energy and conservation policies of this administration. And the third thing that we have to do, in addition to permitting reform and deregulation, is to really look at, reining in government spending and any taxation that has invited these inflationary pressures because of climate policies. Top of mind to me would be the termination of the Inflation Reduction Act. Some Republicans may not like that because they have benefited from it in their districts. A couple, 20 or so in the House had said we support it, and there's always rumblings of Republicans like parts of the IRA, even if they didn't vote for it. But that is really what needs to take hold in order to truly unleash energy in this country, to maintain environmental quality, and also just to see this philosophy or rather an agenda of energy abundance, which welcomes this production safely done here at home, unleash so-called molecules of freedom to give liquefied natural gas to our friends abroad so that we can stymie the dominance of Russia, China, and the other countries that are not as environmentally friendly, but also produce, they use it as leverage to really hamstring the United States. So if we're energy independent, and we have a lot of abundant energy resources, we can export that after we use it here at home to people to wean them off, especially friends and even maybe people in the middle who want to be friendlier with the U.S. We can help them wean off of reliance from China and Russia, which are dominating energy and shouldn't have. But because of our deference to net zero under Biden-Harris, we've really shrugged off our leadership here, giving people who are despoilers of the environment domination of energy issues. So those are 3 things we have to look for. It's going to be interesting if they're going to use the mandate to truly do that. Do they keep some holdover Biden-Harris policies? But I think with that mandate that they have prescribed to them from the regulatory state, you're not going to see a lot of obtuse rulemaking. You're going to see an elimination of household appliance efficiency standards, which are mandates. The EV mandate's going to be gone. You're going to see kind of this peeling back of restrictions on public lands, not only for energy production, but even for access. Biden and Harris were clamping down on access for hunters and anglers. Two people don't know this, and this is something I've communicated to fellow hunters and anglers through our center and outside of my work at IWF. But even your ability to have fun in nature was being stymied by Biden and Harris. Yeah. So you're going to see also that go away as well.
Well, we've got some more to get into, but I want to just make mention that there was a very clear talking point that the president invoked a lot at his rallies, and that was that while he was very proud of his appointment of RFK to head up kind of the health emergency aspects of his administration, that he was going to keep him separate from the energy independence discussions. And I felt like maybe it was a little bit of a disservice, because I think that if you really do the research, you see that fossil fuels have helped civilizations thrive, live longer, become healthier over time. And we can talk about some of the ways that fundamentally means, but we'll come right back after this break. She is Gabriella Hoffman. She's the director of the Independent Women Forum's Center for Energy and Conservation, and I'm glad that she's with us. It's Kevin McCullough from Times Square on That Kevin Show. Don't go away.
All right, friends, just a few days left for you to get your registration in. SugarFinaHoliday.com if you want to take a try at winning one of 3 advent calendars from the Candy Kings themselves, SugarFinaHoliday.com, including the Hello Kitty 50th Anniversary Advent Calendar. Go to SugarFinaHoliday.com to register for your chance to win. SugarFinaHoliday.com, SugarFinaHoliday.com.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
With us, Kevin McCullough. Glad to be with you. Times Square is where we come to you from every week. That Kevin Show. We've kind of mixed the top headlines with what's going on with a little bit of fun for your weekend. So thank you for taking us with you. All things related, thatkevinshow.com. Thatkevinshow.com. You can check us out there. Gabriella Hoffman is my guest. And Gabby, I want to talk about this competitive idea. Then the president kind of drew the contrast. I don't know that anybody else was connecting the two, but he's saying to RFK, go fix the public health issues. We're going to work on energy over here. The real story about fossil fuels is that every civilization that has used them effectively has helped lift their civilizations out of poverty. And in fact, the wealthiest nations on the planet and throughout history have figured out a way to use them. And the U.S. uses them more safely and more cleanly than any place in known civilization. It's not a bad thing that we're going to go domestically find energy sources, is it? That's not going to impact public health?
No, and I think exploring fossil fuels and not admonishing them is actually going to be to our benefit, not only for the economy, for our energy supply, to really become dominant and abundant and a net exporter and leader in energy again. But it's also going to lead to a healthier environment all across the board, because when we're not reliant on countries that are polluting far more than we are, our footprint is going to be down. And they add so many unnecessary steps with, relying on oil and gas from abroad and shipping it back here and using questionable labor. So all things considered is going to be safer. But someone reminded me, we held an event recently through our center in Pennsylvania a little bit before the election, and it was Sarah Phillips, who was a RNC speaker, and she's a petroleum engineer. And she said something really interesting and something indelible that I will never forget in terms of appreciating fossil fuels and the energy mix that we have. And she said, especially for women, if you, let's say, have a child maybe born prematurely, you have to spend time in the NICU, or your kid has to spend time in the NICU. That NICU is being powered by fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And without that, your child may not be able to survive or maybe have a lower quality of life. And that just left such an impression on me. And I'm surprised that that's not discussed more. But she's one of the few people who is trying to hone in on that point. But so much of our life is dependent on it. And this admonishment we have seen throughout the last 4 years coming from Biden-Harris, this administration, has been really disconcerting. And the rest of the world is also still, I would say, ramping up their oil and gas production, because they see that these intermittent solar and wind investments, if you can call them investments, it's government boosting of these so-called unproven
without the subsidies, they don't last.
No. And so solar and wind is not working. That is why you see technology companies, previous net zero, even climate alarmist proponents, like Microsoft, Amazon, all these tech companies now are going big on nuclear, because they see that solar and wind cannot meet the needs, the electricity demands, not only for AI data centers, but even just for the amount of energy and electricity we're consuming as a society. And it's not a bad thing. It means that people are going to be having more comfortable living conditions. Things are going to be quicker, internet, whatever, AI data centers.
Kind of akin to trying to feed the human body nothing but lettuce and expecting it to last very long. I guess technically you could do it for a while, but no one's going to be happy about it. And that's kind of the best illustration I can come up with, that wind and solar are kind of like lettuce in the energy menu. They'll last for a while, but it's really expensive, takes a whole lot of it. And you mentioned the AI data centers. Look, every app on your phone now has an AI component. There's not a software that's being written. There's not a an online game or chat room or anything else that doesn't have an AI component. And the amount of electricity necessary to power those is astronomical because of the computing power that's necessary for it. And there's just no way we get there. And here's the other little secret, Gabby. We didn't go down in our use of fossil fuels even a single gallon over the 4 years that Biden and Harris were there. They tried to make us think that we weren't as dependent upon them, but we actually increased our dependence upon them.
We had to, as a response to their directives, even while they were decreasing the amount of available leases to be bid on. I think in the Gulf of Mexico it was 3. In the Gulf of Alaska, it was even less. So it was more so a response to the reason why we saw a higher development or higher production happening. It wasn't because of the policies that were strangling it. It was a response to the supply and demand, of these resources. So the markets will overpower any regulation. And again, because of this tilting in the favor of these unreliables, they can't meet the needs, they can't meet the demand, and then you have to ramp up natural gas and oil to back it up.
One last question real quick before we go. What can he do via executive action to get this rolling even before Congress takes it up?
I believe we're living in a post-Chevron world, so the dynamics in terms of rulemaking is going to be a little different. So I don't see President Trump using the regulatory state to enact bad policies. Most likely he's going to be deregulating.
Get rid of a lot of the bad ones.
He should still be able to undo a lot of the bad policies.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Kevin McCullough, thank you for being here. It's the most wonderful time. It's my favorite time of the year, man. I'm not kidding you. I love, once we get past Halloween, I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas. I saw something on Instagram this week where this photographer in the Northeast, he loves to take these landscape pictures, and he says, here's our calendar. October 1 through 31st, Halloween, November 1 through 27, Christmas, November 28, Thanksgiving, November 29th through December 31st, Christmas. And that's how it goes in his house. I'm kind of like that. I got music playing that's pre-Thanksgiving, but I'm certainly taking time out in each.
Are your trees up?
To be thankful. I don't have my tree up yet. No, not yet. But at the end of the day, it is a season of joy, of giving, of gratitude, and of all the wonderful things. And that disembodied voice coming from outside there, let's put him on screen here. It's Todd Chatman from CSI, and he's back with us again. Todd, always appreciate you. And you love the seasons too. You and I have worked together for a long time. So there is something special about this time of year. And when you have the opportunity to take someone's life that has been nothing but death and turn it into something that is joyous and fulfilling and charitable and loved and all the rest of it, like we do with CSI, it is really an amazing thing to witness. And that's why I've asked you to come back and tell us some more stories. We've been on this journey since February of this year, trying to liberate 208 slaves. Specific names. We know exactly who they are. We know where they are. There is another liberation scheduled before the end of the year, which means we could get them home for Christmas. But we have a few dozen left that we have not yet reached. We've had more than 160 liberated, but we want to finish well. We want to get all 208 home for Christmas this year.
Absolutely. And, if you've got a person on your list, and I think we all do, the person who has everything, you cringe every time you have to buy the Christmas gift for them. Well, maybe this year you make a donation in their name, $250, you free a slave, and then just create, on your computer, some sort of certificate and just say, hey, look, for Christmas, we made a donation and you have helped free a human being and change the giving them their life back. Or if you just want to do this out of the goodness of your heart on behalf of you and your family, that would be awesome. Of course, your gift is tax deductible. And Kev, we're just so excited. I mean, we've already freed 1,200 slaves this year, women primarily, but some men as well. Children, we're able to affect the release of kids who have been born in slavery. Oftentimes, these women have been raped by their slave owners multiple times, and they get pregnant. And, if we can, of course, we want to keep those families together, those mothers. As a matter of fact, you can imagine this as a parent, if you're a parent. So someone comes to free you and you're like, well, I've got to take my child or my children with me. And we're not always able to negotiate that. And so sometimes women have to make the choice. Well, I'm not going to leave right now. And so we go back to work and try to get the kid. We do have heartbreaking stories of women. We were able to negotiate the freedom maybe for one of her two kids. And so she brings the youngest back with her, but then a child left behind. And so even though it's a beautiful story of freedom and redemption and a new life for these moms that do have to leave some of their family behind, or it could be a parent or a sibling that was maybe captured as well, it's heartbreaking at the same time. So there's a lot of heavy and hard stuff, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to set captives free, people that have known that really thought they would never have their life back. Their identity has been taken from them. They've been abused in every way you can possibly imagine, physically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. And so to be able to, again, give them that life back, there's nothing more beautiful. So if you've never given a gift to CSI, maybe you're hearing about this for the first time, I would really just strongly encourage you to do what Kevin's family does, what my wife and I do, and give to CSI, and let's set some more people free.
Yeah, $250 will give a slave its liberation, but beyond that, it will give her everything she needs to start her life over again. And just to Todd's point there that he was making, there is not a slave that we liberate that when they're telling their story to the CSI people, that number one, they are not fully immersed in gratitude and saying thank you to those of you that have helped us find liberation, to get free, to be back. The way that they can put it in their language is sometimes a little choppy to our English ears, but they are so earnest in that thankfulness. And then they quickly add, but please don't stop. Please don't stop until every slave is free. And so that last part kind of haunts those of us that really care about this, because we know that there are several thousand that we still have the opportunity to try to help. But to Todd's point, it is an immensely joyful thing. And I like to put it on a measuring scale, Todd, because when these people were taken into slavery, the abuse, the pain, the sexual hurt, the physical beatings, the verbal assaults, the just horrible treatment by the family members of the slave master, the ruthless and inhumane way that they are treated as cattle. In fact, their cattle is more valuable to them than the lives of these slaves. It's just, all of that pain is so heavy. And so it feels like the scale is very out of proportion. But when CSI finds them and brings them home, you start to see the scale going the other direction. And for the pain and the darkness and the hurt and the kind of hopelessness that they encounter, the joy and the anticipation and the gratitude and the inexplicable happiness that they have on the other end of it is equally intense. 208 are what we've known that we could get liberated for our efforts right here. And we have at least 3 or 4 dozen of those left to go. And for those of you that have already given, and that means 160 or so plus have been liberated, thank you. You've affected that joy. That sunshine is being spread. That happiness is being felt. It's the ones that we haven't gotten to yet that I'm concerned about. 888-342-1010, 888-342-1010. Call and make that gift. It's $250 to liberate one slave. How many slaves, how many lives would you like to touch? 888-342-1010, or go to bringherhome.org online. Bringherhome.org, bringherhome.org, or 888-342-1010. Please go right now.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Hi, it's Old Joe, and I approve this message. Now from Times Square, it's That Kevin Show.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Voxtradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be That Donald Show. We don't have that, so we have That Kevin Show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Still to come, sketch comedy along with Assignment Desk Weekend, a Holderness Family, and Not a Parrot. Then answering the question, what happens next? It's Max Lucado. And then we salute our veterans with Drew Jacobs and Coffee Anderson in the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, the man who quietly admits he wants to be the new Kayleigh McEnany. Here's That Kevin.
Dave, I don't get it. I don't understand why you have to make stuff up like that. I never said I wanted to be Kayleigh McEnany. Although there's nothing wrong with Kayleigh McEnany. She's a perfectly delightful, she's a wonderful human being. Yeah. Great individual. She's been on my show a lot. I like her a lot. Very, very nice. Harvard law grad. Yeah. Kind of killed it in the press secretary position. But if I was going to be a press secretary, who do you think I'd want to be?
Sean Spicer?
No, I want you to take a guess at it.
Sean Spicer?
No, not Sean Spicer. There's nothing wrong with Spicer. I like Spicer. But there was one press secretary in Trump's first administration who was the boss.
It wasn't that girl
and
from Melania's
nobody got away with anything with it. You're drawing a blank. Seriously?
Yep.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, man, all the way.
Oh,
that's good.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the news.
For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. The election of Donald Trump as the 47th president has now been cited by medical authorities as dangerous for certain segments of the population, saying in some instances it has induced narcotic dependency.
Be positive, but today I don't feel, yesterday I felt better. Maybe it was the Valium.
Joy Behar, co-host of The Shrews, we mean The View, admitting to her drug problem, all while receiving great news.
I'd like to be positive, but today I don't feel, yesterday I felt better. Maybe it was the Valium. But today I feel like we lost the Senate, the Supreme Court, the executive branch. The House is on the verge of going to him. It's pathetic. There are no checks and balances.
Assignment Desk Weekend has reached out to the president-elect to ask about this particular side effect, and undeterred, the response from 47 was unequivocal.
Look, Joy Behar is just as much a person as anybody else. So we're going to make her life better too, whether she likes it or not.
As the fallout continues for Dems trying to find out why they lost so overwhelmingly on Tuesday, different reasons have been offered. Jen Psaki, former press secretary, said racism and sexism were at the core of the reason. This despite the fact that Trump got more Black, Latino, Arab, Asian, and Jewish vote than any other GOP president in history. Another theory, Joe Biden secretly joining the Proud Boys. A former Obama speechwriter is claiming Trump's appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast was what ultimately put the candidate over the top. John Favreau also observed the difficulty Dems would have in being in that situation. He said, I can count on two hands the number of Democrats that would do okay in that setting. The difficulty is that the Dems want to stick to their talking points. Assignment Desk Weekend would like to point out that if they didn't, literally no one would vote for them. And finally, Dolly Parton would like to invite the Princess of Wales to the distinctly American holiday of Thanksgiving. She'd also like to comp their tickets to Dollywood. The country singer had been sad to miss an invitation to have tea at Buckingham Palace last year while Parton was touring for her most recent album, Rockstar. Parton has previously met with Queen Elizabeth. She said she hopes to serve the future queen her famous mashed potatoes. Assignment Desk Weekend has learned that Middleton is intrigued by the concept of the culinary dish, almost as curious as her father-in-law is at the concept of putting ice in beverages. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
I have ADHD. I wrote a book about it, but it turns out my loving wife also has ADHD, a different kind. She has already decorating for the holidays disorder. For her, this year is the most early onset ADHD I've ever seen. Yesterday, she came inside and said, honey, I think some punk kids smashed our pumpkins. And I was like, thank God we have a ring cam.
We do?
Yeah, the footage was truly hard to watch. This morning, I went to work, but I forgot my phone. I went back in to get it, and I caught her in the act. She was wearing an elf hat, blasting Christmas music, and there were pine-scented candles everywhere.
You know what? It brings me joy in this dumpster fire of a world.
I understand, but what about Halloween and Thanksgiving? Like with your ADHD, it's like they don't even exist. We've tried pumpkin pie. I found it in the trash. It was replaced on the counter by a gingerbread house that I guess we'll have out in the open for 75 days. We tried a pumpkin spice latte. That lasted 1 day. She's already moved on to something called a venti eggnoggacino with a candy cane sugar rim. I begged her to at least put our scarecrow out for 1 week. She agreed, but now she has him riding on top of a light-up reindeer. I know that my wife's ADHD is something that she can't control.
And I don't want
it obviously affects millions of people out there. So with that in mind, here are some signs that you might have already decorating for the holiday disorder. Do you find yourself wandering to the back of a Target to see if the seasonal aisles are up?
Yeah.
Have you already downloaded and printed the Hallmark movie schedule for the next 3 months?
Obviously.
Do you already have a corny reindeer nose and antlers on your car?
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Do you have a Days Until Christmas app on your phone?
And you don't? If you have any of these symptoms, you're not alone, and there's no cure.
You're gonna make no effort?
They just gotta live with it. Am I right?
Or you could just like wait a few weeks.
Santa, take the wheel. It's go time. Ooh, ooh. Jingle bells. Do you hear them? Hear the jingle bells?
No.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
No.
I'm hearing them.
It's October.
If you think it's Christmas and life gets better, it's easier when it's Christmas.
What is that? Here are some signs that you might have already decorating for holidays disorder.
I was holding her collar and I was like,
oh, is that fun?
I thought she would jump.
She really likes the bells.
Yes!
For over 200 years, combat chaplains have provided the bedrock of care for every branch of the military.
Our chaplains are non-combatants. They go into a battle space without a weapon. You have to be fearless to do that.
That's me, comforting the injured soldier when I was a chaplain. But after I left the military, I struggled to make sense of my experiences when I got home.
Justin was definitely a different person when he got back.
And then, something completely unexpected happened.
Long-lost Army chaplain has finally been identified 70 years after his death.
Chaplain Emil Capon was one of the most famous, most heroic combat chaplains in history. As I had been there for so many others on the battlefield, I knew that I should be there when Chaplain Capon was laid to rest. And maybe it would help me sort through why I was feeling so lost. As I set off, I felt I was being led by the inspiring stories of combat chaplains of all faiths who came before me.
Chaplain Litkeep carried over 20 men for evacuation.
The 4 chaplains from the Dorchester. That is one of the greatest examples of chaplaincy.
I came to this moment where I realized it's time for you to stop preparing warriors to meet the enemy and start preparing them to meet eternity.
Being a chaplain is a quiet profession of service, and chaplains rarely make headlines. So I was shocked when I realized that people from all over the United States came together in the spirit of Emil Capon to honor him, and to honor the service of every one of us who has ever accepted this calling.
This is the valor we honor today. An American soldier who wielded love for his brothers so pure that he was willing to die so that they might live.
If you look at any war at any given time, a chaplain was there, equipped with a fighting spirit that provides a refuge in the fight.
Ready or not, we'll be right back. That Kevin. From New York, that Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show from Times Square. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you with us. You know that I do not hide the fact that I am a born-again evangelical Christian. And in this day in which so many people express so many things about what they believe, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting you know that in advance, and it actually means something to me. But what difference does it make if our faith systems don't hold some hope as to a life beyond what we are living through? For instance, if your only hope in the last 4,972,218 days of this election cycle has been to get Kamala Harris or Donald Trump elected, then what happens on the day after it and you weren't on the winning side? Is there something beyond that we are aiming for now? That's kind of the question that my next guest is asking in his new book, What Happens Next? A Traveler's Guide Through the End of This Age. And I'm very delighted to welcome, to the first time on this show, but many times to my microphone, Pastor Max Lucado. Max, it is so good to see you. Welcome back.
Well, the joy is all mine. Thank you. I'm honored. I deeply appreciate it and appreciate what you're doing. And I'm super excited to discuss what we're going to be talking about.
Normally, we get to do this in person in New York, but you're in your study in Texas, and I'm glad to have you with us. So, what made you ask this question and decide that you needed to weigh in on this topic?
I love this topic. This topic being the study of end times, what the Bible has to say about how God will wrap up this version of history. It's just been a fascination for me, especially, to be quite honest, as I've gotten older, as I get closer and closer to my own departure. I'm just about to turn 70. I've got a lot of birthday candles to be placed on the next cake, and my bald spot's getting bigger and my hair's getting grayer. I just want to know. I just really want to know. In fact, you'd think that would be the first question we would ever ask, and that is, what happens when we die? What is God's plan for eternity? And what are the steps between here and our final destination?
It is such a vital, and it's kind of a classic philosophical question, is it not? That if I don't understand, why I'm here or where I'm going, then what purpose does any of it count toward? I mean, they've been asking this since men were wearing robes and standing on rocks. But in your journey, and I can relate a little bit to the getting older part, and kind of the things that are important to me now, I didn't think about as much just 10 years ago. But what were we made to do? What is this about? I know there's 4 kind of big ideas that you explore in the book, but what do they amount to?
I think we begin where the Bible begins, in the Garden of Eden. The book of Genesis, the first stories of the Bible, are really the most prophetic stories about the end times, because we remember that God knows the end from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So if you want to know the end, well, you just go to the beginning. And what God created for Adam and Eve is a picture of what God has created for us. A perfect paradise with perfect bodies, perfect harmony with nature, perfect relationship with one another, and most of all, a perfect relationship with God. That's the destination. That's the goal. In the book, I unpack the timeline, the events that will happen to take us in that direction. But if all a person knew was that God has destined a perfect paradise for all who want to go there, then I think that's an amazing accomplishment, to realize that, live with that hope. You know, the Bible says that these brief and momentary struggles are really not worth comparing with the glory that outweighs them all. Right now, in the middle of an election year with so much conflict around the globe, concern about what's happening in Israel and Iran. I mean, it's an important time to make sure that our bags are packed and we have our destination determined. And God gives us the itinerary, and we have the peace that comes from him when we accept his invitation.
I can hear some of my less than convinced viewers and listeners asking the question, but Pastor Lucado, how do we know that what you're telling us about what the Bible says and what it points us to is the right version? Because Allah has his view of it, and Buddha has his view of it. And my Jewish friends believe that they're still waiting for that one that will come and set people free. How do we know that what Jesus offers is the right?
Yeah, Allah's still in the tomb. Buddha's still in the tomb. And the great teachers of the Jewish faith that have influenced even my life, they're all still in the tomb. The difference is that Jesus rose from the dead. He authenticates his words by defeating death. That's what convinced me, Kevin, in my early 20s, when a friend said, okay, if you're not going to believe in Jesus, you tell me what happened to the body. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't find any proof other than the fact that he had risen from the dead. So if he is risen from the dead, if he is governing the affairs of mankind, then he authenticates what he said about his return. And he repeatedly said, I will come back. And then he authenticates the writings of the New Testament by his resurrection of the dead, because we believe that someday he will return bodily, physically, and he will reign on earth, and we'll reign with him in his eternal kingdom.
I'm hearing this, and I'm sure that there are people asking, well, what does that look like? Who am I to reign with him for eternity? I mean, on some level, in the day in which we live, this is Marvel superhero galactic empire kind of stuff. And yet John wrote about it, and it's there in black and white in the text of Scripture. So what does that look like?
Well, it's coming in a matter of phases. If you and I die before the next major prophetic event, we'll go immediately into the presence of Christ in our spirits, in a place called paradise. If we're on earth at the next major prophetic event, we'll be caught up into heaven. Our bodies will be caught up into heaven, and the resurrected saints, the bodies of the resurrected saints will be caught up into heaven. We'll all go into paradise. That's what the Bible calls the rapture. And then there will be a time of severe trouble. You do not want to be on earth during this time of tribulation. But at the end of the tribulation, we will return with Christ, and Christ will set up an earthly kingdom. I believe it's that 1,000-year promised golden era that's in the book of Revelation, chapter 20, that we'll enjoy. That utopia that all of us long for now, Christ will have his garden. At the end of that, there'll be a judgment. There'll be a judgment of everybody who has rejected Christ. And you do not want to appear before Christ without having said yes to Christ. And after the end of that judgment, after those people who said, I don't want to be with Christ, have their wishes honored, then those of us who do want to be with Christ will enter into the eternal state, the literal heaven, the new heavens and the new earth, and reign with him forever.
He is Max Lucado. The book is called What Happens Next? A Traveler's Guide Through the End of This Age. And friends, I think you're going to find a lot of hope in this, as kind of spooky as it may sound, to understand what Max Lucado is unpacking and what it really means to take a good look at it. I strongly encourage you to do that. What Happens Next? The name of the book. Coming right back with Max Lucado from Times Square.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
And we're back. I'm very honored to welcome Max Lucado back to the Kevin McCullough microphone. Again, we normally get to, or we have in years past, gotten to do this when you've had a new book with you sitting in my radio studio. But now that we do everything via virtual television and everything else, I'm just glad you can join us, Max. It's so good to see you, and I wish that our visits were more frequent. The book is called What Happens Next? A Traveler's Guide Through the End of This Age. There's a lot of confusion about the end of times, end times, revelation, however people put it into terminology. What's the most important thing for someone who just happened across this conversation, doesn't know much about the background of what we're talking about? What's the most important thing for them to understand about what this series of prophetic events will be about?
That's a great question. You always ask great questions.
Thank you.
That's a great one.
Coming from you, that's a deep compliment, and I am very grateful.
Well, I would say nobody has greater dreams for you than God does. God has greater dreams for you than you have for you. And nobody has a greater dream. Nobody has a more passionate commitment to your life than does the God who made you. And that's the big idea. The teachings in the Bible about end times are never meant to scare us. They're just meant to prepare us, to give us a sense as to what is about to happen. The truth of the matter is this time on earth is so brief. It's just a speck of sand. It's just a puff of smoke compared to our eternal existence. And God has given us everything necessary to make a decision to accept his invitation to spend that forever with him. Those aches and pains, those fears, those struggles that you have, you were not meant to have those. You were not meant to have those, and you won't have them long. And saying yes to Christ means Christ saying yes to you and accepting you into his eternal plan to live with him forever. Now, some people spend their whole life telling God to leave them alone. And in the end, God, who is a God of justice, will do just that. And those who have spent their life telling him to leave them alone will be separated from God. But those who have said yes to God will be joined with him. In the book, I just try, Kevin, to unpack what seems to me to be the right sequence or the most understandable sequence of events so that we can get excited about what is going to happen. Many of the things that we're experiencing right now were prophesied in Scripture, like the regathering of the children of Israel to the nation of Israel. That's a promise that for 2,000 years, I'm sure Bible students thought that could never happen. But what happened in 1948 inaugurated the final age of history. And now we're seeing Israel surrounded by its enemies. That's a specific promise found in the book of Ezekiel, that in the end times, the nation of Israel will be surrounded by enemies. And we're watching that on the news every day. So these prophecies are coming true. I think it's an exciting time to be alive. And I do believe that all the stage is set for the final events to happen.
When you were studying, and I'm sure that much of this book you've shared from the pulpit as well, what were you personally
I don't know, renewed in or refreshed in or saw with new light or eyes, as someone who's probably, well, you had to study this, in seminary, and you know, every pastor teaches through this at some point in time in their ministry. But at this stage of where you are, what did you bite into that you went, oh, wait a minute, I never saw that before?
I had never seen the beauty of paradise. Paradise is not heaven. Paradise is kind of like the front porch of heaven. Paradise is where your soul goes, where my soul goes, if we're not on earth during the rapture. Paradise is where my parents are, where my friends are, where my big brother is. That's where they go. They become, they enter into the presence of Christ in the form of a spirit. Now, they'll eventually be reunited with their physical body, but not yet. Yet they're experiencing every beauty of heaven. They're experiencing the love of Christ, fellowship with one another. And to a certain degree, I think the Bible teaches that they're aware of what's happening on earth. The Bible calls them that great cloud of witnesses. So maybe they're witnessing. That either means they've witnessed Christ, or maybe they're witnessing us. I like to think they're witnessing us and cheering for us that we can be faithful until it's time for us to go. So to answer your question, I really got excited learning and studying more about paradise.
All right. That's fabulous. The book is called What Happens Next? A Traveler's Guide Through the End of This Age. And if you're familiar with Max's writings, you know that he is so down to earth, and he just touches you, seems like, on every page with something profound and meaningful. And Max, I count it a real privilege to consider you a friend. And we've had many conversations, even off the air, about these things. And thank you for this new offering. And we'll look forward to seeing what God does with it.
Thank you, my friend.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show. As you know, nearly every week we like to talk about some form of entertainment that is new or hitting the theaters. And this weekend, Veterans Day weekend, it is very important to pay homage to those who have gone before us and helped us keep this freedom that we just celebrated in the election this week. You know, the fact that we can still do that and have that peaceful transference of power and all that stuff has been paid for in billions of gallons of patriots' blood. And our military men and women have kept us free for all this time. That's why this new project called Fighting Spirit is so intriguing to me. It traces some stories of some service members that we don't often think about, but probably should. The writer, producer, director of the project is Richard Hall, and he joins us. Richard, thanks for being here. Chaplains are an interesting form of the service because they don't carry sidearms. They are often literally undefended in terms of, you know, their own personal well-being, and yet they're so vital to what happens. What made you feel inspired to do Fighting Spirit?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely.
I greatly appreciate it. And I think that's really what intrigued me is what in the world would make somebody want to go to combat wearing a uniform but carrying no weapon? That just is a head scratcher. And clearly it's not a job that one does just for a paycheck. It's obviously motivated by something far larger. I think the word we use in the film is calling. It's a calling for people. And I think that's probably a good word, although we may not even be able to put why they do it into words. And yet when they go to their office, it's set against the chaos of war, and that collision of two different things. It's just something that I don't think we'd ever seen explored cinematically. And so I was brought into this movie 4 years ago. It's been a long 4-year labor of love journey that it started with my friends at Paulus Productions, which is a nonprofit production company based in Los Angeles. It was started by a Catholic priest 60 years ago. Mm-hmm. They wanted to make this movie about military chaplains, and I had made a prior movie, a documentary with the U.S. Army in the past that Halle Berry and I had made called For the Love of Liberty, the story of America's Black Patriots. And she and I won a bunch of big awards on that. And so I think Paulus thought that I had a particular trust with the military. And I think maybe that turned out to be correct. And this is my 28th movie as a producer, but it's my first as a director. And so the more I learned about the subject matter, I was so intrigued by it. And I then was able to get in contact with a guy named Jeff Strucker, who is a former Army combat chaplain and Army Ranger who was portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down, and said, hey, would you be interested in having your story portrayed in this movie? And he said, yes. And then I reached out to my friend Chris Pratt, and he said, yes, these are stories worth telling. And we partnered with the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps, and everybody just kept saying yes, and it created a life of its own. And now that's
like a little seed that grew into an entire forest of things.
It is, and now it sort of comes to an end with the movie coming out in theaters for Veterans Day.
Well, hopefully it's just the beginning of people beginning to see it and understand it. Tell us a little bit about the film itself. I understand that there was a Army combat chaplain that his remains had been missing for some time, since World War II, I think. How does that interplay with kind of the main narrative of the film? You've got one chaplain that kind of serves as our guide through the experience, but kind of break it down for us.
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's the thing about documentaries. You make a plan at the beginning, and the only thing you know for sure is that the plan's going to be wrong. And in this case, Father Capon was sort of a unplanned part of making this movie. And so we were probably halfway done with the movie. We had identified the stories we wanted to tell. We'd already shot a lot of interviews and started compiling those stories into kind of different little vignettes. But the movie was really having a hard time finding its voice. And one day we looked up and we heard about Father Capon's remains being identified. So he had died as an Army combat chaplain. He was a Catholic priest 70 years earlier in a Korean prisoner of war camp. He had the opportunity to be freed, and he chose not to. He chose to stay with the soldiers, and it led to his death. And so when his remains were identified, we had heard that they were going to bring them back to the U.S., give him a burial properly and a funeral in his hometown of Wichita, Kansas. And my partner on the project is Justin Roberts, who's a former Army combat chaplain himself and a veteran. And that's important because I'm not a veteran. My dad is a veteran. I have a lot of veterans in my family, but I'm not. And so Justin came on board early to really be a veteran lens so that when we were telling these stories, it would be truly authentic. And Justin was back from the military. He was in Lake Charles, Louisiana, where he lives. He was trying to figure out what the next phase of his life was going to be, and he was really struggling with that. And so we heard about Father Capon being discovered, and so we sent Justin and a camera crew off to Wichita to shoot whatever this was going to be. We didn't quite know how it would fit in, but we just thought that it might. And Justin thought nobody would show up, and when he got there, I guess if you know anything about the Catholic Church and the military, they know how to put on a good show. And so everybody came from far and wide. The city of Wichita shut down. It was this huge event. And it really became a pivotal moment in Justin's life and his journey. And I guess there's that word journey. That's in the title of the movie. We all seem to go on a journey on this movie, but obviously Father Capon's journey came to an end with that. And I think weaving those two stories together, the Justin's journey to greet the remains of Father Capon, and then also the other stories that we had set out to tell of a select number of the 419 combat chaplains who died in service for this country. Weaving those together, I think, is really where the movie found its magic and its heartbeat. And I think that's really what audiences seem to be responding to.
Well, I would like to encourage everyone that's listening and watching on radio and TV right now to go to fightingspiritfilm.com, fightingspiritfilm.com. You can see where it's playing. You can access tickets. You can schedule your show times. But this weekend, as we celebrate the sacrifice of our veterans and the service that they have put forward on our behalf. Again, every one of us owes a free weekend for us to be out and about with our families and doing what we enjoy doing, because men and women have put on the uniform and sometimes paid the ultimate price. These were the people that helped those people paying that price endure those hardest moments, and sometimes gave their lives as well. So go check it out, fightingspiritfilm.com, fightingspiritfilm.com. Richard Hall, the director, producer, writer, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin.
You got it. Kevin McCullough, we're coming right back from Times Square. The New Music Spotlight is straight ahead. Stay here.